My name is Clara, and I'm 23 years old, and I thought it was just another shift at the hotel restaurant. The chandeliers sparkled, laughter filled the air, until a fork slipped from an old janitor's trembling hand. The sound was tiny, but it froze the room. Then came the billionaire's furious voice, sharp enough to cut the silence. In that moment, I knew one choice would change everything. Before I tell you how speaking up for a janitor nearly cost me my future, but instead gave me something I never dreamed of, I want to ask you, what would you do if a billionaire humiliated someone powerless right before your eyes? Share in the comments, tell me your city and country, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. I wasn't born into luxury. My life began in a cramped apartment with walls stained from years of wear, where my mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. By 23, I was juggling long shifts at one of the city's most glamorous hotels with college courses I struggled to afford. For me, waitressing wasn't a side job. It was survival. The hotel sparkled with a kind of wealth I had never known. Marble floors shone like mirrors. Chandeliers spilled golden light across the hall, and polished silverware lined tables where guests in silk and diamonds whispered about their business deals. To them it was normal. To me, it felt like stepping into a palace each night, even if I was only there to serve. Among the staff, there was one person who never made me feel invisible: Henry, the janitor. He was 72, his back curved from decades of hard work, his hands cracked and rough from scrubbing floors. Most of the younger staff walked past him without a glance, but I couldn't. There was kindness in his tired smile, dignity in the way he carried himself. During short breaks, he'd tell me about his late wife, the son he had lost in war, and how the job was all he had left. His stories carried both sorrow and strength, and I respected him deeply. Then there was Victor Stone, the billionaire whose reputation could silence a room. Ruthless in business, feared in the hotel. Every time he arrived, managers straightened their ties, waiters walked faster, and no one dared to make a mistake. He wasn't just wealthy, he was power embodied. That night, as I tied my apron and picked up my tray, I thought I was simply starting another shift. I had no idea that one fallen fork would bring Henry to the edge of humiliation, and me to the hardest decision of my life. The dining hall was alive with chatter, glasses clinking, under the golden glow of chandeliers. Waiters moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays of wine and appetizers. I was on my 3rd round when it happened. A fork slipped from Henry's trembling hand, landing on the marble floor with a sharp clatter. Normally, no one would have cared, but the sound cut through the air, drawing every eye toward Henry. He froze, shoulders stiff, his weathered face flushed with shame as he bent to pick it up. My chest tightened. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, and for the first time his age seemed like a burden too heavy to hide. Then I felt it, the sudden shift in the room. Victor Stone. He sat at the head table, towering presence wrapped. In a perfectly tailored suit, eyes narrowing like a predator catching weakness, the billionaire's lips curled into a frown, and the laughter around him died instantly. I knew that look. We all did. It was the look that made managers sweat and staff scatter. Henry didn't stand a chance. Unbelievable. Victor's voice sliced through the silence, low but laced with venom. He tapped his finger on the table, every movement deliberate, commanding attention. A man can't even hold a fork properly. In my restaurant? His gaze shifted toward the manager, sharp as a blade. Why is he still employed here? The room fell deathly quiet. The clinking glasses stopped, conversations froze, and Henry stood there, fork in hand, trembling as if the weight of the world was suddenly on his shoulders. I gripped my tray so tightly my knuckles turned white. I'd seen mistakes before, spilled drinks, broken plates, but no one had ever been targeted like this. This wasn't about a fork, it was about power, and Henry, with his faded uniform and hunched back, was the perfect victim. "Get him out," Victor barked, his tone cold, final. "If this is the level of incompetence you tolerate, then your entire staff is a disgrace." The manager's face went pale. He stammered, "Mr. Stone, it was just an accident." Victor slammed his palm against the table, rattling the silverware. "An accident? A fork on the floor in front of my guests? Do you think I tolerate sloppiness in my empire? Fire him, now!" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some guests exchanged uneasy glances. Others looked away, unwilling to be part of Henry's humiliation. Henry straightened slowly, trying to muster dignity, but his voice cracked. "Please, sir, I've worked here for years. I need this job. I'll be more careful," Victor sneered. "Pathetic. A man your age should have retired long ago. You're an embarrassment." My heart pounded in my chest. I watched Henry's trembling hands, the hopeless slump of his shoulders, and something inside me twisted. No one moved. No one spoke. They were all too afraid of Victor Stone. And that's when the thought hit me. If I stayed silent, I would be no different. I would be just another coward turning my back on a man who had done nothing but serve with quiet dignity. The tray shook in my hands as I set it down, my throat dry but my voice breaking through the silence. "With respect, sir, it was just a fork." Every head snapped toward me. The room went still again, but this time for a different reason. A waitress had just spoken back to Victor Stone. "Excuse me?" His voice was dangerously calm. I swallowed hard, my knees weak but my words firm. "Henry has worked here longer than most of us combined. Firing him for dropping a fork isn't justice, it's cruelty." The silence was deafening. My manager's face turned ashen, his eyes screaming, "Stop, Clara, you'll lose your job." Guests whispered in shock, some covering their mouths. Victor leaned back in his chair, eyes locked on me, a thin smile curling on his lips. "So the little waitress thinks she can lecture me." My heart thundered, but I held his gaze. "Maybe. I'm just a waitress, but respect doesn't cost billions." The hall filled with gasps. Henry's eyes glistened with gratitude, but fear still hung heavy in the air. I had just challenged the most powerful man in the room, and I knew the price. Could be everything. The room pulsed with silence. Every eye was locked on me, the waitress who had just dared to defy Victor Stone. My chest rose and fell rapidly, but I didn't back down. I had already spoken, and there was no turning back. Victor leaned forward slowly, his gaze sharp, measuring. "Me." "Say that again," he said, his tone soft but edged with danger. My voice shook at first, but grew steadier. "I said it was just a fork. Henry doesn't deserve to be humiliated for a mistake this small. He's given this place years of his life. That deserves respect, not punishment." A ripple ran through the crowd, soft gasps, murmurs of disbelief. No one ever challenged Victor Stone. The man was a titan in business, feared by rivals and adored by those who wanted his favor. And here I was, a waitress in a plain black uniform, daring to contradict him in front of his audience. The manager tugged at my sleeve, whispering urgently, "Clara, stop. You're going to ruin yourself." But I pulled away, my eyes fixed on Henry. His face was lined with decades of quiet suffering, his hands still trembling as he clutched the fallen fork. His eyes met mine, wet, bewildered, grateful. That look gave me strength. Victor tilted his head, studying me like I was some kind of puzzle. "Interesting," he murmured. Then his smirk returned, sharp and cruel. "Tell me, Clara, do you always think it's wise to challenge people who could destroy you with a single word?" The weight of the room pressed down on me, but I didn't flinch. "Maybe it isn't wise," I admitted, my voice steady now, "but it's right." Victor's smirk widened, but his eyes grew colder. He rose slowly from his chair, the movement commanding silence across the hall. The air thickened as he stepped toward me, his polished shoes echoing against the marble floor. "You think you're Brave, he said, his voice low, controlled. You're not brave, you're foolish. He circled me slowly like a predator testing its prey. Guests leaned back in their chairs, some holding their breath, others staring in horrified fascination. No one dared to interrupt. Do you know who I am? Victor's voice rang out, filling the space. I built empires. I own half the skyline you see outside these windows. Men twice your age grovel for my approval. And yet here you are. A girl, in an apron, daring to tell me what's fair. Heat rushed to my face, but I stood tall. My voice was quiet, but it carried. Power doesn't give you the right to trample people who have nothing. The words landed like a stone, dropped into still water. Silent shock rippled across the room. Victor's expression hardened, his smirk fading into a cold glare. You dare lecture me about rights? He spat. He turned sharply to the manager. Fire her, fire him, both of them, now. The manager froze, torn between fear of Victor and pity for me. Henry took a shaky step forward. Please, sir. She was only defending me. Victor snapped. Enough! His voice thundered, echoing off the high ceilings. Get them out of my sight! Gasps filled the room again. My heart hammered in my chest, but I held my ground. If this was the end of my job, so be it. I'd made my choice, and I would not regret it. The silence after Victor's outburst was suffocating. My chest ached with every breath, but I refused to lower my gaze. Around me the guests shifted uncomfortably, their whispers barely audible. Some looked away, unwilling to be part of the scene. Others watched with wide eyes, as if they couldn't decide whether I was brave or insane. The manager wrung his hands nervously. Mr. Stone, perhaps we can discuss this later. Victor cut him off with a single glare. I don't discuss, I decide. His words cracked like a whip across the hall. Henry bent lower, his voice trembling as he spoke. Sir, please. I've worked here 30 years. My wife, she passed. This job is all I have left. His plea hung in the air like smoke, fragile and fading. Victor sneered, folding his arms across his chest. And that's supposed to move me? You drop cutlery in my presence and expect pity? No, weakness has no place in my world. I bent down beside Henry, placing a steady hand on his arm as he tried to gather the fallen fork. Don't! I whispered. My voice was soft but resolute, then louder for all to hear. He doesn't deserve this. Victor's eyes snapped back to me, sharp and gleaming. Still talking? He said, his voice low and dangerous. Fear crawled up my spine, but I held firm. If you fire him for this, then you're not showing strength, you're showing cruelty. The hall gasped again, louder this time. It was no longer just a spectacle, it was becoming a confrontation no one could look away from. I felt Henry's grip tighten on my sleeve, as if begging me to stop. But I couldn't. The humiliation in his eyes was unbearable. Victor studied me in silence for a long, heavy moment. His lips curved into a slow smile. Not of kindness, but of something else. Intrigue. Victor stepped closer, his shadow stretching. Across the marble floor, the room held its breath as he tilted his head, regarding me with unsettling curiosity. Tell me, Clara, he said, his tone calm now, almost playful. Do you always speak this way, even when you know it could ruin you? My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. Yes, because if we don't stand up for each other, then what's left? The billionaire chuckled softly, the sound echoing through the hushed hall. It wasn't the laugh of a man amused, it was the laugh of someone who had found something unexpected. Interesting, he said again. He turned slightly, addressing the entire room. Do you see this waitress? He gestured toward me, his hand sharp in the air. She has more courage than half the executives I employ, more fire than men twice her age. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, others frowned in confusion. Victor's eyes narrowed on me once more. But courage, it's a dangerous thing. It either builds empires or destroys them. His words hung heavy, his smile unreadable. Then he sat back down at his table, steepling his fingers beneath his chin, as though watching a game unfold. Tension didn't ease, it sharpened. No one knew what Victor would do next. Not the manager, not Henry, and certainly not me. But deep down I felt it. Something had shifted. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was a test, and I was the unwilling contestant. Victor sat in silence, his gaze fixed on me like a spotlight I couldn't escape. The air was thick with anticipation, every guest waiting for the next blow to fall. My hands trembled against my apron, but I forced myself to stay still. Then, to everyone's shock, Victor began to clap. Slow, deliberate, each strike of his. Hands echoed like thunder in the hushed hall. "Well, well," he said, rising to his feet. "Finally, someone in this place with a spine." The room erupted into gasps. The manager's jaw dropped, Henry's eyes widened, and I froze, unable to process what I had just heard. Victor stepped toward me, his smile sharp, unsettling. "Do you know how rare that is, Clara? People obey me, fear me, flatter me, but they don't challenge me, and yet you, a waitress, dared to speak truth to my face." I blinked, confused. You wanted me to challenge you?" Victor chuckled. "Wanted? No. Expected? Certainly not. But I was hoping. You see, I don't dine here just to eat. I watch. I test. I measure the people around me, and tonight you've shown me more than any executive I pay millions." He turned, suddenly to Henry, his expression softening just slightly. "And you, old man, 30 years of loyal work, and they let you scrub floors as if loyalty has no value. That ends today." The crowd erupted in whispers. Henry clutched his chest, his lips trembling. I don't understand," he whispered. Victor glanced back at me. It was never about the fork. It was about seeing who had the courage to stand when everyone else stayed seated. Then, to the astonishment of every guest, Victor pulled out a sleek black card from his wallet. Its surface gleamed under the chandelier light, a symbol known worldwide. The black card, unlimited wealth, exclusive access, a symbol of trust and power. And he held it out. To me. For a moment, I couldn't move. The black card rested between Victor's fingers, but my hands felt glued to my sides. My voice barely broke through the ringing in my ears. I don't understand." "Why me?" Victor's smirk deepened. "Because, Clara, you've already proven what money can't buy. Integrity. You defended someone with no power at the risk of everything. That's a quality rarer than gold, and I reward rarity." Gasps swept through the hall. Guests leaned forward, some whispering in awe, others in envy. The manager nearly collapsed in relief, muttering, "Unbelievable." Henry's eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking as he whispered, "Clara, you saved me." My fingers finally reached out, trembling as I accepted the card. Its weight felt unreal, heavier than it looked. Victor leaned in slightly, his voice just for me now. "Use it wisely, or don't use it at all. Either way, remember this moment. The world doesn't change by silence, it changes by courage." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I was only doing what was right. Victor's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. And that's why you'll never be only anything again." The room erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then swelling into thunder. Some clapped because they admired me. Others clapped because they wanted to stay in Victor's good graces. But in that moment I didn't care. I wasn't just a waitress anymore. I was someone who had stood, someone who had made a difference, and somehow, against all odds, I had been rewarded for it. Henry gripped my hand tightly, whispering through, "Tears, you gave me back my dignity." And I realized then it wasn't the black card that mattered most. It was the fact that I had refused to stay silent. The applause still echoed in my ears as I stood frozen, the black card heavy in my hand. My manager rushed to my side, his face pale but plastered with a nervous smile. "Clara, I knew you had potential," he stammered, as if rewriting history to save himself. I barely heard him. My focus was on Henry. He stood straighter than I had ever seen, tears glistening in his tired eyes. "No one has ever spoken for me," he whispered. His voice cracked, but his smile was radiant. "You gave me back my pride, Clara." Guests began to approach, some shaking my hand, others simply murmuring words like brave and extraordinary. Their admiration felt strange, almost unreal. Hours earlier, I was invisible. Now the spotlight burned bright, and I didn't know if I wanted it. Victor's voice cut through the noise. "Enough, let the girl breathe." His tone was firm, but there was no cruelty in it now. He adjusted his cufflinks and added, "You'll hear from me again, Clara. I don't let talent walk away." And just like that, he strode out of the restaurant, leaving behind stunned silence and 1,000 unanswered questions. Henry squeezed my hand one last time before shuffling off to finish his shift. He was still the janitor, still carrying his worn mop and bucket, but tonight he carried something else too: dignity. As for me, I was no longer just a waitress. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew it wouldn't be the same. Not. After tonight, months passed, and my life transformed in ways I could never have imagined. True to his word, Victor reached out. He didn't just hand me wealth, he gave me opportunities. He introduced me to designers, investors, and mentors who opened doors I thought were locked forever. Step by step, I began building my dream career. In interior design, Henry still worked at the hotel, but no longer as the invisible janitor. Victor promoted him to a supervisor role, honoring his decades of service. I visited him often, and each time he greeted me with the same line. "You gave me a voice when I had none." Sometimes I lay awake at night, staring at the black card resting in a drawer. I hadn't used it once. To me, it wasn't about the money, it was a reminder. A reminder that courage matters, that one choice, one voice can change everything. And now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have spoken up, even knowing you could lose your job? Or would you have stayed silent like everyone else? Tell me in the comments, and also share which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to know. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss more true stories like this, because sometimes the smallest act of courage can shock the world.